I feel I should start this with a general review of the show first. If I'm going to explain what I don't like and what doesn't work, I think it's only fair to touch on the things that do work, because for all intents and purposes, the show is very good at some things, just not as great at others. But for the sake of making this video as clear as possible, I want to state that this is not going to be a spoiler-free video. If I'm uploading this when I plan to, the show will have come out a month ago, so once again, this video will be spoiler-filled. I should start by saying that the show is impressively well written. I think the fact that you can watch the show in any order, save the last episode, it's pretty impressive. I think that does indeed cause its own problems down the road, but we'll get to that later. What I do think is important is that we acknowledge what the show succeeded at. All of the actors pulled their weight really well. I think that Jai Courtney, the actor who plays Bob, felt a little wooden in the Blue episode, but other than that, performed quite stellar, especially in the Pink episode. But Bob's henchmen in the Pink and Red episodes were also just pretty weak as well. They were fun, but they were just kind of cardboard cutouts, and they could have been played by anybody. I don't think their actors really carried their weight like a lot of the others in this series do, even some of the smaller characters like the Doctor in the Green episode. The original score and soundtrack are very good, and they make the show a lot more fun and enjoyable to watch. This show's pacing is practically non-existent, which is an adverse effect of the show being non-linear. There are some episode orders that you can watch this show in, and it will make it an absolutely abhorrent experience. There has to be someone who got the show sent to them in reverse chronological order, because Netflix gives everyone a random order. And there has to be someone who got this show like the furthest episode in the future, and then the furthest in the past, and then the next furthest in the future, and then the next furthest in the past, and so on and so forth. And I feel like that would just cause a lot of problems. Also, if you're ending on episodes orange or yellow, it's pretty boring because you've seen all the cool stuff up to that point. Not saying you won't have unanswered questions, every episode answers a question for you, which is also a good feat of writing, but it's just not as interesting as others. Long story short, the pacing varies, but will typically be bad if you don't get like a good first episode or two. The plot as well is boring and overwhelmingly average, but we'll get to that in a minute. Overall, this show comes to about a 6 out of 10 for me, but let's get to figuring out why that is. The order that I watched this series was pretty good and is as follows. The Blue episode, 5 days before the heist. The Green episode, 7 years before the heist. The Yellow episode, 6 weeks before the heist. The Orange episode, 3 weeks before the heist. The Violet episode, 24 years before the heist. The Red episode, the day after the heist. The Pink episode, 6 months after the heist, and of course, the White episode, the day of the heist. But the order that I personally recommend you watch the show in is Blue, Violet, Green, Yellow, Orange, White, Red, and Pink. If you want, you can move the White episode to the end, but personally, I feel like the Blue episode is the perfect introduction to the show, and in some degrees, it feels like the writers know that. You get all of these people's names clearly stated to you in the basic premise of the show as well. And you probably noticed this, but the way I recommended that you watch the show is in chronological order, including the White episode, the one they explicitly state to you should come last. And honestly, it's just because I find that it makes the show a lot easier and more digestible to watch. No, don't get me wrong, I feel like it's fun to watch this show in random episode orders and figure out why things happen the way they do. I think a great example of this is the relationship between Ava and Ray becoming a lot clearer in the Orange episode, and the Red and Pink, for example, as well. But some things like Detective Abbasi's drug addiction don't really get more interesting as the show progresses. They're easily put together. Like, it doesn't matter when you hear it. That kind of solves every problem or riddle will ever get sent to us, no matter what order you watch the episodes. Outside of the Bob, Stan, Judy love triangle, all of the relationships are kinda straightforward. There's no real drama there. Romantic relationships, I should state. All of this to say, the order you watch the show, I find doesn't really matter as much as it should. Before you say, oh, that's the point, we know that. No, I mean, like, it literally doesn't matter. There are orders that I think you could watch the show and that are gonna make the show really interesting and to some degree confusing, but for the most part, I think you're gonna get the same experience no matter how you watch the episodes. But being completely honest, some of them are gonna f you over. The goal of this show is to feel like it's some sort of unraveled mystery that progresses throughout watching the show, no matter how you do it. But the problem is, it doesn't always end up feeling that way. It feels like you're getting the same core concepts of these people's deep thoughts and feelings explained to you over and over again. In fact, there are only a few mysteries that aren't unveiled into the last episode, but even then, if you've seen episode Red or Pink, you may not even be questioning it by that point, because you've already seen these episodes. you don't really care how it happened at this point because you're invested in the fact that these characters died already. I think it's interesting to know things like how RJ died and how Bob lost his voice, but other than that, I feel like the mysteries that we get solved in the last episode aren't really that interesting unless the episode you watched before the white episode was the red episode, because it's all still fresh in your head. Before we move on to the next segment, I really need to kick the out of this dead horse and make sure it is insanely clear that you should not start with episodes that are not the red episode and the blue episode. The red episode is a weird one, and I say you can do it because it's interesting to see all of these characters in such a disheveled and defeated state, and it's just a very interesting and gripping way to start the series. I heavily recommend you start with this one. It does give a much more slow and steady introduction to the characters and all their predicaments as well. But imagine starting with Pink. Like seriously, you sit down after pouring your nice tall glass of grape Kool-Aid, and 15 minutes later, all but 2 of the main characters are dead. What reason do you have to watch it? Me personally, getting attached to the characters is a lot of what makes a TV show fun to watch. So why would I bother learning about these characters when I'm now well aware of the fact that a lot of them suck and a lot of them die? Me personally, I wouldn't really give a about how we ended up here. I'm annoyed that I got dropped into the deep end and I don't even know these people's names. I feel like Orange is an episode you could start with, but there's a large amount of the episode that is made better if you already have prior context, which I don't find to be necessary for a lot of the others. The same goes for Yellow. Watching them pull the Diamond Way heist with little context is not really that interesting, especially because 1, it's just a setup job, which is something they repeatedly say, and 2, it's a dumb heist. Everyone in the show calls it a dumb heist. It's not that interesting. I know it seems like I'm bitching a bit here, but you may have noticed a common thread for all these reasons. But it should be noted that the major overarching point is, it's incredibly hard for any episode besides Blue or Red to grab your attention as a series start. Orange and Yellow lack a real gripping story, Pink gives you information overload and takes the drive away to watch the series, and Green and Violet are okay, but like I said earlier, they complement each other if you watch it in chronological order. But at the same time I say that, I'm not sure you should even start with Violet, because Ray's vendetta against Roger Salas is a lot less interesting in later episodes if you know it's just his dead wife and not an actual betrayal. But I'll get to that in our next segment, which is... Kaleidoscope has this core problem of just not being that interesting. This comes from the fact that at the end of the day and on the last page of the script, this show's plot is unbearably pedestrian. It's just a heist show that doesn't have the depth to carry itself for 8 full-length episodes. All the important stuff in the show could be cut down to like a 3-hour movie if you really tried, but the problem is it would just be another heist movie. But this one has Giancarlo Esposito in it. I mean, think about all the major plot lines in the show. To be honest, the Green episode could be entirely skipped. The only thing that it really sets up is the fact that Ray and Stan were cellmates, and that information could be set up elsewhere, in a shorter version, along with the fact that Ray has Parkinson's, which also could be set up elsewhere, in a shorter version. I think if the show isn't so hell-bent on each episode taking place a set amount of time before the heist, the Green and Violet episode could be one episode that just has a time skip in it. Same goes for Orange and Yellow, especially because those are only 3 weeks apart. Episodes like that are so interwoven anyway, it feels natural if you just watch them one after another. So after you've sat through all 8 episodes and about 7 or so hours of runtime, how does this show end? A show about betrayal, distrust, staying one step ahead should end with a plot twist in a similar vein. And it does, but from a character you probably wouldn't expect to betray the cast. Ray's own daughter, Hannah. I think it makes perfect sense, don't get me wrong. What I don't like is her reason. She does it to teach her dad a lesson, which, yeah, sure, makes sense, but she literally says she does it for a tax write-off for the triplets and the rich get richer. Why does that concern her? Like, yeah, sure, maybe she's just more morally correct, but we actually saw her seduce someone earlier in the series for her own personal gain. I don't think she's more morally correct. Oh, and I can't be the only one who figured out exactly what was going on when the mailman in the red episode walked out with about 70 boxes that are about the same size, shape, and probably the same weight as all of the Bond cases. Like, seriously, if you watch the Red episode, it is so unbelievably obvious for the rest of the series that Hannah is going to be the one to take the bonds. The problem is, now you just spend your time figuring out why she did it. But let's be real, nothing else is really gonna grab your interest as much at that point in time. Ray's motivations for sure are a lot less interesting than I once hoped. Don't get me wrong, dead wife, yeah, sure, great motivation. But it's played up so large, and oh yeah, it happened 24 years ago. I'm not saying if you killed my first love, I would just be all hunky-dory with it, but holy man, you're already with Ava, so what the hell are you even on about? Not to mention, Roger didn't kill her. He didn't save her, but he sure as hell didn't kill her. I know that inaction when you're aware of a crime is the same as committing the crime and whatnot, but what the fuck? In the Pink episode, Ray literally admits he didn't know if she could be saved or not. And Roger says he didn't know if he could save her or not. Personally, I doubt that the 15 seconds it took Ray to run around to the other side and get her herself was gonna be enough to save her. Even after Ray reached his wife, he sat there crying for like a minute, so even if she was alive in the hospital, Ray certainly didn't raise her odds of living through it, if we're being fair. I think it was that Roger left Ray's wife in the building, but he hardly took everything from Ray. It's not even like Roger took Hannah from him. Hannah found Roger, not the other way around. I'm pretty sure Roger didn't even know that Hannah was Ray's daughter. I think for 3 of our main characters, their motivations are just pretty weak. Okay, well, firstly, I think the term fixing isn't exactly how I would describe what I think you need to do to this show for it to work. I think a lot of this show does work. It's like a reverse broken clock. It's right a lot of the time, but it's off like twice an episode, and it just piles up over time. That analogy didn't make sense, and no, I will not be explaining further. Come on, kids, let's go fix Kaleidoscope. Firstly, the show's entire don't watch in linear order thing, yeah, scrap that shit. It doesn't help the show at all, in my opinion. Ending with episode White is something that I think you could keep, but watching the show in chronological order is probably the best and the least confusing way to do this. Secondly, cut the show's runtime by about 25%. This show's plot is too long and too boring to warrant being anywhere near the 6 or 7 hours that it is. Like I said earlier, I think you could cut this down into a movie, and it still wouldn't be the most exciting thing, but then you'd put yourself in the corner of the fact that ending with White is like the penultimate conclusion of this show. Even then, as I said earlier, you could probably watch episode White in chronological order of the show, and I still think it would be perfectly fine. Lastly, the motivations of these characters needs to shift a bit. Roger Salas needs to be a little bit more evil for me to really give a shit about him, because he's never killed anyone, he just didn't save anyone. I think if we knew for 100% certain that Ray's wife would be alive had Roger decided to intervene, we could feel more resentment to this guy. But the show literally tells us, IDK. But no, Roger just used the money he got from stealing the jewels to make a life for himself, and Ray got sent to jail for it, and it wasn't Roger's fault. And Hannah, just try to make her a more interesting character. She feels so wooden. So when she betrayed her dad, it was like a what the fuck moment, and not like a what the fuck moment. Oh, and I didn't touch on this earlier, but why the hell does everybody but Judy and Stan die? And why is Judy, of all characters, make off with the cash? Like, we can all agree she sucks, right? I liked her in episode Blue, but she went straight downhill after that. At the very least, she emotionally cheats on Stan with Bob while he's in jail. And even then, Judy and Bob end up getting married, so it's seemingly more than that. And then she just gets back with Stan anyway when she thinks Bob is dead. She's just a really annoying character, and she almost gets RJ killed, which sucks because he's great and deserved better. Like I said much earlier, this show is by no means bad, it just has flaws at its core. It's hard to make heist shows interesting, which sucks because episode White is probably one of the best in the series. The heist is very interesting, but it just takes too long and the setup doesn't really warrant the payoff. All that being said, if you like heist shows or dramas, I could still say that you should probably watch this show. If you don't, I wouldn't really recommend it. I don't think there's anything here for you. But it's a fun show. Anyway, me and the boys are gonna go watch Spy Kids 2. Expect a video on that later this month. Subscribe so you don't miss it. I feel like I should be telling you to turn notifications on or whatever, but I don't have notifications on for like any of the channels I'm subscribed to. So do it if you want, but I'm going to tell you it should be out on the 24th. So come back on the 24th. All right, we'll see you guys next week. I do not know how to prepare to stare at Robo George Lopez again.